Hello, good evening, everyone. If you can hear me, just put a thumbs up or a physical one or a one where you raise your hand. Amazing, amazing. Perfect. Well, thank you all for coming. I know there are a few people still trying to log on, so we'll leave 1 or 2 more minutes for them to log on, but grab yourself a cuppa, any biscuits, anything that you need to make yourself comfortable for this fireside chat, which I'm super, super excited about. And as you can see, the man himself is with us tonight. So hope you're ready for this conversation. Just for some house rules, you can put on your cameras if you wish, so we can actually see some of you. Um, and you can also unmute, you'll be able to unmute yourselves throughout the session. So I will allow people to unmute and mute accordingly, just so we don't have any background noise too much throughout the session. But great to see some familiar faces and names, and hope you guys are excited for this. Okay. Just give it a few more minutes as people log on. Can everyone see the screen that I'm sharing? Give me a thumbs up or a nod. Yep, perfect. Amazing, amazing. Okay, so just so we are conscious of time, I will quickly begin. So some of you may or may not know me, but for introduction purposes, I'm Evelka Powell, and I am the Race for Diversity Program Manager here at Motorsport UK. And many of you would have heard about this webinar tonight through through our Discord community group, which is great to see many of you here. And if you're new or you don't know anything about the Discord, I will pop a link in the chat so you can be updated with any news, giveaways, opportunities, volunteering opportunities, or job opportunities that appear or come up in the industry. So whilst I got some of you here, I just wanted to share some updates because I know many of you would be from the community. So from a Race for Diversity perspective, we do have our community survey that we launched a couple of weeks ago. This is a great opportunity for you to share your thoughts, give us your opinions, give us your feedback on how you felt your engagement with us has been throughout the last year. And once you've completed that, you'll be entered into a prize draw for a lovely goodie bag with some stuff from a Formula One driver. So please do share your feedback, do share your thoughts. The QR code that you can see on the screen, if you scan that, that will also take you to the survey. But what we would like is to have as many of you as possible so we can make the program better, we can implement new things, or we can take away some things that perhaps don't resonate with you. So please, please be sure, and I will be popping in reminders throughout the rest of the week to complete that. International Women's Day is coming up in March, the 8th of March, and we are really excited to share for the women on the call that we will be hosting a Level Up series launch event, which you'll hear more about in the coming weeks, with Crystal Palace FC and Marylebone Cricket Club. This is a really, really cool opportunity where you can hear from people across the motorsport world, from the cricket world and the football world, and all about getting women together so you can kind of see and carve out your pathway in sport. So if it's not motorsport, it can be with cricket, it can be with football, or even tennis, any kind of sport discipline. So this is a great opportunity for you to network, for you to hear about what this series is going to be about, and for you to ultimately have some good food and be with us at Selhurst Stadium in London. So it will be at a football stadium. So more information will be shared on the Discord. And women, you are invited, young girls, you are invited to be a part of that if you're near and around the London area on the 2nd of March. We also have a number of volunteering opportunities across our school and community events. So if you are interested in volunteering or wanting to volunteer in the next coming months, please do drop me a line and let me know, because we're always keen to have more and more volunteers. And lastly, share a testimonial, or if you want to be featured in our 2026 impact report, just any kind of commentary or anything like that, feel free to email us at racefordiversity@motorsportuk.org, and we would love to have you part of our impact report that we will share to our funder, Mission 44. So I just wanted to give you those really few updates just to keep you in the loop as to what's happening in the community and with the program. But you're not here to listen to all of our updates. You're here for an evening with Calum Nicholas. So I'll now hand over to Carol, who will be our host, and she's also a Motorsport UK clerk of the course. And we'll dive straight into the conversation. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. There's also a Q&A tab attached to our conversation tonight. Drop them in there. We would love for the engagement from yourselves. But I will now hand over to Carol to introduce our special guest for tonight.
Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for Velka for that lovely introduction. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carol Glenn, and I've been a licensed official with Motorsport UK for over 38 years now. Started as a marshal, I'm now a clerk of the course, and I help to run most national race meetings in England. During my spare time, I've also got my own race team, and I also go out as a mentor and also as a careers advisor to schools and colleges, and to try and help get people into the sport. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about my lovely guest who I'm here with, and I'm very excited because I've been waiting ages to get him on, and actually managed to pin him down at this early stage of the year. Calum Nicholas. Now, a lot of you who've been watching fans of motorsport, you've been watching F1. You used to see him in the pit lane with Red Bull. So he's going to tell us all about his journey, how he got into that, what he's doing now, and hopefully we'll have a chance to help you'll be able to answer some questions later on. So without further ado, let me hand over to Calum. Please introduce yourself quickly.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me. So yeah, as Carol said, my name is Calum Nicholas. I'm a former F1 technician, author of a recently published book entitled Life in the Pit Lane, and now I'm an Oracle Red Bull Racing ambassador. So yeah, Carol invited me to come and speak to you all this evening about my journey in Formula One, to try and shed some light on career pathways and the skills required to work at what we like to call the pinnacle of motorsport. I've spent about the last 15 years as a motorsport technician. 13 of those were working as a mechanic in Formula One, and the last 10 of them spent as the senior power unit assembly technician for the race team at Oracle Red Bull Racing, helping to power to the team to 2 Constructors' Championships in that time, and Max Verstappen to 4 World Drivers' Championships, as well as quite a few DHL pit stop awards. In my technical role, I was responsible for the build and the service of all the team's race and test power units. So essentially the engines and all of the ancillary systems, so cooling, pipe work, exhausts and the like. I made sure that they were all in good working order across the race weekend, assembled to the correct specification for each event. And then I liaised back with our factory in Milton Keynes to schedule service work and feedback to our design office for any potential improvements or fault fixes that we might be able to do at the circuit. Prior to my time in Formula One, I worked in a variety of different junior categories as motorsport, as well as doing the infamous Le Mans 24-hour. I've also been a member of pit crews in a lot of different roles. But last year, shortly after releasing my book, I took on this new role as an ambassador for Oracle Red Bull Racing. Now, the reason I jumped at this opportunity to take on this new role is sort of because of the experience that I had in discovering motorsport And I want to try and give people more insight into career pathways to professional racing. When I look back at those years since I first decided to enroll at college in 2009, my only real regret is that I didn't discover racing sooner. So my hope is in this new role, I can help more people like yourselves discover the sport and provide a little bit more visibility into the wide range of skills that can lead you to a career in racing. Also, my knees are absolutely knackered. I'm not sure how many pit stops my back's got left in it. So after all that time on the road, I've got to be honest, this new role has been a welcome change of pace for me. But seriously, there really aren't many jobs that can offer you the kind of variety and sort of thrill as professional racing. Jobs that can allow you to design, build, develop incredible bits of engineering or travel the world. Or if, like me, you're just a competitive adrenaline junkie that somehow sort of thrives under pressure, go and do something that you'll absolutely fall in love with. So I guess today I'm going to start by talking a little bit about my journey to motorsport, how I discovered it, and then went on to build a career. And then I'm going to talk about some of the skills I think really matter in a highly competitive team sport. And then finally, I think Carol's got some questions for me, and then hopefully at the end we've got some time for any of your questions as well. So about me then, one of the first things I think people assume when I tell them what I did for a living was that I must have been doing it since I was very young, or that I must have been into racing since I was a kid, or studied engineering and gone to university and got a degree. And all of that couldn't really be much further from the truth. I didn't actually discover that there would be a career that I'd love in motorsport until I was in my 20s. To be honest, I hadn't even considered it. I didn't watch any professional racing. Neither of my parents had any real interest in racing, and I was at a school that didn't really push me toward that pathway. I'd never been encouraged to think about working with my hands, nothing. But looking back, the thing is, I was always that kid that loved engineering, right? I just didn't know it yet. I was that child that took everything apart long before I learned how to put it all back together again. I was that kid that wanted to know how things worked rather than just what they did. So I grew up in Northwest London. My parents, like I said, neither of them had any experience in engineering or interest in motorsport beyond occasionally taking me go-karting. And, you know, back then, access to motorsport for those of us living in urban areas was really limited. And Formula One back then wasn't the global giant that it is today. So for me, I was just never exposed to professional racing until I was already an adult. So that's probably the first bit of good news for all of you, because talking to Carol and the fact that all of you already have this interest means that you are probably well ahead of where I was at that time in my life. At least you've been given that first bit of information about the careers that are out there. Now, one thing I did know when I left school was that the interest that I'd always had in how things worked had turned into a love of all things motorized. So after finishing my A levels, I found myself a job working in like a local garage near my mum's house. Now, any of you that have had the opportunity to read my book will know that I describe Ridge Garage a little bit like somebody's shed, but with a sign on it. And that is very much what it was like. And when I say a small independent garage, it really was that. But at A level, I'd studied English and theatre studies, so nothing remotely related to engineering. Which kind of brings me on to, I guess, my first point, because a lot of people ask me about what they should study for GCSEs and A levels. And it's a bit of a difficult question to answer, because I think if you already know that you want to go and do engineering, it's always a good advice to study maths and scientists on that career pathway. But I've got to be honest, it's not the be all and end all if you're just passionate about racing. So I think the advice that I tend to give, and I think the best advice that I can offer here, is that you should study what you're good at and what you enjoy. The reason that I say this is because actually in modern motorsport, especially in F1, the roles that are available are far more varied than what they were when I began. I'll tell you right now, I think on our campus in Milton Keynes, our marketing and comms office is probably 1.5 times the size of our design office right now. You know, you're talking about hundreds of people working towards all of the other areas of the business. So it's not, if you're just somebody who loves racing, but maybe perhaps you're not necessarily on an engineering pathway, there is still hope if you want to go and work in Formula One. There are loads of amazing jobs out there. The required skill sets are now so wide ranging that discovering what you're passionate about and then figuring out how those skills can apply to motorsport is often a great way round to approach the industry. I think for me, it's one of those things that it took me a while to learn, that figuring out what I loved most about cars was probably the thing that I did first. I knew I loved doing suspension, engines. I really enjoyed the work. Actually, it wasn't until later on, once I was in racing, that I discovered the little things that I really like about the job. Like, actually, it sounds kind of sad, but I really like doing the admin and the organizing and the planning. I really enjoy that part of the job. But ultimately, it's not just mechanics and engineers that make Formula One teams fast. You know, our campus now in Milton Keynes is home to nearly 2,000 people with roles ranging from accounting, human resources, facilities management, marketing. Our marketing departments, they're teaming with artists, producers, content creators. So whilst all those disciplines may vary, the one thing that we all have in common is that we love racing, and that is probably more important than what we studied. So upon leaving school at 18, I ended up at this small local garage. I ended up there mostly just because I really needed to put some money in my pocket, but also it meant that I had a ramp to put my own car on, and sort of start modifying my own car without my mum knowing, I have to say. So for the next couple of years, if I wasn't working on something on the ramp, I was out doing things that you absolutely shouldn't do, racing on industrial estates in the middle of the night. Cannot condone that, but that is the truth for me. I was having a lot of fun, but it wasn't really a career. I wasn't really pushing myself. And then a little while later, I got made redundant. And I was in a bit of a slump, but I got the opportunity to go to the British Grand Prix. And I was doing the pit lane walk just prior to the race in 2009. And I just had a bit of a light bulb moment. And I saw all these mechanics doing pit stop practice and prepping the cars. And I literally just turned I was with my mum at the time, and I turned to her and I just said, well, they're just mechanics. I couldn't do that. And by the time I got to the end of that pit lane, it had gone from I could do that to I'm going to go and do that. So I made a decision that day that I was going to go and be a race mechanic. Now, I knew that I didn't really have the qualifications or know where to start, but I did hear about the National College for Motorsport at Silverstone. So I'm re-enrolled back at college at the ripe old age of 21 nearly. I was actually the oldest student that they'd ever had at the college. But as a general personality trait, when I decide that I'm into something, I'm all in. So that's exactly how I approach racing. So that same year, I worked my first ever race as a mechanic. And then the following year, I literally lived out of my car for about 6 months, driving from racetrack to racetrack, working, picking up any sort of work experience I could for different race teams, doing F3. And that landed me eventually my first apprenticeship, which was with a small GP3 team called Status, who then later on, fortunately for me, went on to take a Le Mans project alongside an American team. And that gave me a load of experience really early on. It's one of the things that I sort of say to people early on in their career, no matter what discipline you want to go into, trackside experience is one of your most valuable assets. And I'll get to that again in a minute. But it was shortly after that I applied for the role of a sub-assembly technician at Marussia F1 team. It was a factory-based role. I think sub-assembly is brilliant because it forces you to learn a wide array of assemblies that make up a Formula One car quite quickly. And at what was a small F1 team, we really didn't have all the resources that we're blessed with at a team like Red Bull. So just for a comparison, when I was at Marussia, we were just under 300 employees. When I joined Red Bull in 2015, we were about 700 employees, and now we're about 2,000, just under. So it gives you a scale of what a small F1 team looks like. It really was like a baptism of fire. But it was there I'd get my first taste of life in the F1 paddock. So I took on a trackside role. I was the rear end mechanic for Jules Bianchi. I did that for about a year and a half, up until sort of nearly the end of the 2014 season. So I was 24, living the dream. And then when Marussia collapsed, it was a bit of a stark lesson for me in just how sort of ruthless and challenging this industry can be. But it was also a good lesson in the value of persistence for me. So when the team did fold, I was unemployed again. I spent the weeks that followed basically hounding every F1 team in the paddock for absolutely any opportunity I could find to stay in the sport. And I leaned on some of the relationships that I'd built in that paddock already. That persistence ultimately paid off. I joined Red Bull Racing in January 2015. As a number 2 car build mechanic. I spent about a year on the support team, going and do all of the show runs that Red Bull do, sort of working my way back up to the race team, and I took on the role of PU assembly technician at the beginning of 2016. Listen, I people often ask me about this journey and how I got through the next steps. And look, I set out in 2009 with a couple of really, really simple goals for myself. I said to myself, I want to build and maintain race cars for a living. And then the other one was a little bit more ambitious, is in that I said to myself, I want to do Formula One pit stops. So those were the two big draws into the sport for me. 16 years later, I must say, I'm quite proud to look back on it all. You know, 6 world championships and a member of the most dominant pit crew the sport's ever seen are accolades that I couldn't really have ever dreamed of when I left school and went to work in that little garage in North London. But more than the success, I think discovering this career in racing, it just gave me a life full of experiences that I likely would never have had otherwise. You know, I've been fortunate enough to travel around the world over and over again, experience different cultures, make lifelong friends. I discovered lots about myself that I tend to actually thrive under a bit of pressure. I was at my best when I'm thrown in the deep end. I enjoy the tough days. And I definitely still live for that 2-second pit stop adrenaline rush. I have to say to you, since taking on this new role, it's about the only thing I miss is that pit stop rush. Most importantly, I got to say, I got to do something that I truly love for a living, which I'll be honest, I think is one of the most valuable things that you can discover in life. So I'm going to finish by offering you my sort of number 1 piece of advice today. And then I'm going to let Carol ask some of the questions that she had for me. Now, this is something that I was fortunate to learn very early on from my first tutor at the National College of Motorsport. It was one of the first pieces of advice that the college used to give newly enrolled students. And I think it's probably even more important now than it was back then. And it's what I touched on earlier, which is that your practical experience for me will always be your most valuable asset. I think that there really is no replacement for it. It's why I encourage people to consider racing careers as early as possible. Now, I'm not just talking about mechanics and technicians. Even for those of you that might want to work in design or strategy or R&D, having real-world experience in racing environments to put on your CVs is one of the biggest leg ups you can give yourself when you do get to this point where you're trying to transition from education into employment. There are things about motor racing that you will never really be able to learn in a classroom. You will need to see it, you'll need to experience it firsthand, and you'll need to fall in love with it. And you'll kind of only do that by being there. There are so many careers where practical experience is often valued over purely academic achievement, but motorsport's definitely one of them. So my advice is that whether you plan on attending university to study for a degree, or like me, you don't think that's the path, or if you're undecided, getting involved early at a grassroots level can put you in a really strong position no matter what you want to do. And, you know, for someone like Carol, who's been in this industry for so many decades, I'm sure she'll attest to that as well. Now, where do you get started? Well, go-karting, club racing, junior formula racing, F3, F4, the likes, F1 Academy. These are still great entry points. They're the ones that have been around for the longest. And if you're a keen future mechanic, that's a great place for you to start building the skill set. So my advice is you can either follow the path that I took and find local garages so you can first start understanding maintaining motor vehicles, because ultimately race cars are often simpler than road cars. So it's not a bad place to start. But also karting circuits or motorsport clubs, obviously Motorsport UK being a great resource for this. Anywhere that's near enough for you to contact, ask if you can take on any kind of work experience, start building this engineering skill set and understanding the principles of whatever it is that you're interested in. going to race paddocks when opportunities arise, talking to people in the sport, utilizing these connections to find the next opportunity and then the next. I'm, one of the things that I try and support in my role with Red Bull now is our talent academy, in particular apprenticeships. I'm a huge advocate for apprenticeships, and I know they can be really hard to come by. The government has not made it easy for businesses with all the red tape, but it is still a proven pathway. I'll tell you right now that the man who's taken on my role since I left the race team at Red Bull, he joined the team as an apprentice about 5 years ago. I had the great pleasure of teaching Ollie all the skills required for the role he wanted whilst he was earning a wage and gaining experience. So it's quite a sort of point of pride for me to see Ollie now on the TV each week going and doing what I taught him, which I like. Now, when I talk about finding opportunities in racing, though, I really do mean any kind of racing that you can apply your skills to. The world of motorsport is so vast. We immediately jump to the giants of Formula One and world endurance, but beneath it, there is a whole load of racing series with different disciplines, different engineering challenges all over the UK. So yeah, my advice is that you take the initiative to seek out these opportunities, and that will put you in the best possible position later. And obviously, organizations like Motorsport UK and resources like Carol are brilliant at pointing you in the right direction of that. So that's one of the traditional pathways that you can take into the sport. We are also now seeing some more diverse pathways, things like simulator racing, which can be a great training ground for STEM skill development. So even for roles in things like race engineering, data analysis, strategy, jobs that do require a degree level qualification, you can still start building experience long before you get to the point of looking for work in the industry. At the same time, all of this involvement, it demonstrates your passion for racing to future employees. Like when you see people and they've put all of this into it, that you can see that choosing that person, it kind of gives you an insight into the kind of effort they're going to put into helping your team succeed. Ultimately, though, I'm going to have to say this is it's up to you to go and get it right. This is a very competitive industry. Nobody's going to hand it to you. The job market is competitive. So you need to be proactive in finding those opportunities and go and get the experience and hone your skills. And that's whatever discipline you're interested in. You will need to be prepared to get back up and keep pushing when you experience knockbacks. Rarely does anything great in this industry come about easily. I have to say, I was still doing bits of work experience for free at 21 years old, sleeping in my car at racetracks, working ridiculous hours. You might not need to do all that in 2025, but one of the things that you'll learn as you start to enjoy yourself in the sport is that you'll very quickly know if you've chosen a path that's right for you. And that grit and willingness to do whatever it takes, it speaks volumes to hiring managers about the sort of dedication that you can offer a team in achieving its goals. My first, you can't be afraid to start from the bottom. My first ever race as a mechanic wasn't on a highly developed Formula One car. It was a Honda Integra in the Brick Car 24 at Silverstone. And as I said, I was sleeping in my car, running tyres back and forth to the Dunlop tent. But that was the weekend that I fell in love with it. So yeah, that's a little brief outline of my story. Thank you very much for taking the time. I hope it can offer some sort of guidance. Carol, I'd love to answer some of the questions that I know you've got for me. And then if we've got some time at the end, we can answer the group's questions.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Calum, because in fact, a lot of the questions I had, you've covered. But I've still got a few more. And just to back up what you said, I mean, to get involved, I mean, at all levels. And one of the things that I try to encourage people to do is to become a marshal, like I did. A volunteer, because that gives you access to circuits, getting into the circuits. You can end up being a track marshal, a paddock marshal, a scrutineer. I'm now a clerk of the course, and gives you access. Also, what I'm also finding, and I talked to a lot of students, is they never go to race meets, never go to races. They don't realise that there is things like you say, club racing. You've got rallycross. You've got sprints and hill climbs, and near where you live, there will be a small club that does those sort of things. So you just need to Google and find out, and start off there. Historic racing, I encourage a lot of kids to start off with the historic racing, to learn how those cars are put together, especially if you want to do design. And then you can learn, you understand how a car was made and how it evolves, and how to think of maybe the next good scheme idea for the modern day car. So I can't push that enough, and just getting yourself immersed. And a lot of you may not even really be aware that motorsport is one of the few sports that relies upon volunteers. And so even the marshals, timekeeper, a lot of people that work within this industry actually work for no pay and work very long hours. I mean, like I'm normally at a circuit like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and often don't leave till 7 o'clock at night. So I can definitely understand what Calum was saying about putting yourself out, but it's worth it. I mean, I like about the things I've done. I've marshaled at places like Le Mans, Spa, Nürburgring, did all those sorts of experiences, and that does gives you that outlet. So please think about that. And again, it doesn't matter whether you want to become an engineer or something that wants to do logistics, anything, any little bit of experience is good on your CV. If you are going to university, get yourself immersed. If you're going to a university that's got a university sport group or its own karting team, get involved with that. There's another thing that's used to be called F1 in schools. Get involved in those, because those things all help you on your CV, because it again gives you access and gives you more understanding about what it is with the sport. Callum, going back to you, I mean, obviously your life's changed. I also can resonate with about the adrenaline. I mean, the one thing that gets me going is my adrenaline kicks on a Friday afternoon, and it goes on a Sunday, and it gets you through, and then you die during the week. But yeah, that buzz is something you cannot quantify, but it does just gets you through the sport. It's like not eating properly, no sleep for maybe 72 hours, but you love it. You come out with a big grin on your face.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to go back to your book, because obviously one of the ways I met you sort of properly was last year when you launched your book, and I bought tickets to come to see your book launch, and I bought tickets for the book launch. And I thought it was going to be held in a place called Osterley, which is in London near Teddington, around that way. It wasn't until I put it into my sat nav, I realised I had to drive 3.5 hours to Osterley near Telford. But off me and my friend did, and we trotted off on a Sunday afternoon and up to Osterley, and found this school hall eventually. And again, and it was so nice to see there, because you generally greeted me like a long lost friend.
Well, I was so glad to see you there. I couldn't believe that anyone had made that 3-hour journey just to come and see little old me.
Yes. And again, it's something that I've always had to put up with, not to put up, but you've had the same, I think, that you've often been the only face of colour somewhere.
Yeah, sure.
And I must admit, when me and my friend walked into that room that evening, we were a bit late because we couldn't actually find the horse. We were about 5 minutes late. We walked in, there was a room full of white people, and apart from you and us two walking in, we were the only people of colour there. So has it, not saying that has it bothered you, have you been conscious of it? Do you think diversity is important for the sport, for it to be changed?
Look, I think my experience has definitely changed over the years. So, when I grew up in North London, a massively multicultural sort of environment. And then the first time when I was sort of out of London and away from home was when I went up to college, and it kind of took me by surprise. The fact that it became very apparent that I was going to be in an environment with very, very few people of color. So like, I mean, I'll say like, up until I think from when I started in 2009 up until I joined Red Bull in 2015, I'd never directly worked alongside another person of color or a woman. Right. So it's not, when we talk about diversity, it wasn't just ethnicity, it was a very white male dominated sport. Now, whilst when I started at college, it was something that obviously I noticed and I realized. Well, at first it didn't ever occur to me that it would be something that would be a barrier. I had a friend of mine at the time who sort of probably recognized the situation more so than me, in that when I told him that this is what I was going to do for a living, he literally said, "Cal, they're not going to let you in." And perhaps, he had a different view of it. It's one of those things in that whilst I wasn't aware of it at the time, in some ways it meant that it was less likely to be a barrier for me. right? You know, like it would be very easy to say to people now, oh, just ignore it. It's not that easy to just ignore it. So I almost consider myself lucky that I just was perhaps a little naive to not really see it
Yeah.
at that time. And then it wasn't until many years later when we were revisiting this and we were talking about the lack of diversity in the sport that I sort of then recounted those experiences. And one of the experiences that I did vividly remember is that often when you're in these environments where you are the sole person who is not a white European, it becomes or I felt that it became like thrust upon me to be the black voice in every workplace that I worked in, right? So like anything that's going on in the news or on social media that in any way sort of revolves around ethnicity, it sort of becomes thrust upon you to be the voice for that side
Yeah.
or whatever, right? And you know, early on in my career, firstly, you know, I'm 20, I don't have all these answers about why people don't choose these careers. You know, I didn't have the answers then. And I remember, I always used to remember driving home down the M1 thinking to myself, well, I should have said this or I should have said this, you know, and you kind of expect way more from yourself than you should have to as a young person who just wanted to build a career and build race cars and go racing, right? Like now, you know, given hindsight and wisdom, you know, these are things that I'm glad to talk about. You know, I'm glad to talk about and try and make a difference in. But I got to be honest, it was one of the probably the harder things when I was early on, in that you feel like you should have these answers and you don't.
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand, because I didn't expect, you know, I didn't think about it. I became a marshal because I love cars. I love being around cars. I fell
Yeah.
in love. Like my first trip to Brands Hatch, sitting on post 5 at Druids and seeing these cars and hearing the cars. That was it. It's been a love affair ever since. And I wasn't sort of too conscious at first, but then over the years, it becomes more conscious, more
Yeah.
because I was a female, then I was a black female of color, and you know, and then suddenly, and people then make you aware of that. But
Yeah.
I haven't let it stop me, and obviously everybody around me that knows me knows that it hasn't stopped me. But sometimes people do like to throw those obstacles in your path to try and trip you up. And like you say, you
For
feel like you
sure.
have to become that mouthpiece, that person that's got to um, um, have the answers. And we haven't always got the answers, but
Yeah.
also, a bit like me, you just have to think, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to be. I'm going to be in this space. I'm proving that I'm capable of doing this job, and you've got to stick with it. So you've got to have that resilience. You know, if somebody throws you a curveball, you just try and think of another way to get around it. Try not to make it be a big factor. But equally, we do need to be aware of what is going on, and it would be good. And one of the things, obviously, what you're doing and I'm doing is to try and make sure we can change the landscape so that as more and more people come in, they feel more comfortable, that they're seeing more people that look like us, that speak like us, and feel more comfortable. So that's why I think it is important.
For
So
sure.
do you want to tell us a little bit more about your actual role as an ambassador? Because obviously that's so different to, you know, doing your pit lane stuff and, you know,
Yeah.
helping put the car. It's a very much more laid back, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you know,
Or is it?
it's at times it can be, at times it can feel a little bit more stressful, but it was a very big change for me. I think, look, I spent since about 2018, was when my social media started to grow. It was something I remember the first podcast I ever did was one hosted by Ariana Bravo and Steph Turner. They did a podcast called Driven by Diversity. And it was one of the first opportunities I got to talk about these issues, and it sort of became something that I really enjoyed doing. And so I spent the next few years sort of building that social media profile, doing more podcasts, giving people a little bit more insight into the sport. And then the book came along, which was it was sort of a mad project, really. My manager, I sent her some writing that I'd been doing for Silverstone Circuit for a column. And the next thing I knew, she'd spoken to a literary agent and they'd decided between them that I was going to write a book. So, so I was pretty much like, oh, okay, I better start writing this book. But then with all of that, it sort of came to a point where I was looking to make the jump. And it's quite a big jump. Look, I say I sort of deliberated over it for the best part of 2 years, right? It's a big thing. You know, I'd spent pretty much all my adult life working as a member of a team, doing this one thing which I knew that I was good at and I knew that I could do. So it was a scary thing to sort of take this leap. So when Red Bull approached me at the beginning of the 2025 season, and this was pretty much a week before we were due to go to testing in Bahrain, I got a call from our head of comms at the time. He said, "Cal, have you got 10 minutes?" And I thought to myself, "Oh God, what have I done?" Getting a call from the head of comms is usually never ever a good thing. So I was like, "Oh no, what have I done?" And I sat down at this meeting, and he said, "Look, Cal, I know you've been looking at these other opportunities, and I know there's some media interested. We've got this position available. Do you think you fancy changing roles?" And it was one of those moments where I think, look, in life, there aren't many opportunities that you get to make a big change and make it really work for yourself. I've always been one of trying not to be scared of change. Like I said, I'd sort of spent 2 years building up for this, so it felt for me that it was the right time to take an opportunity and take a new path, right? As much as I love being in the garage as well, I'd been doing that same role for a very long time. I'm someone who liked to learn new things. So this new role for me has been an opportunity firstly to learn a lot. One thing you don't get on the race team in Formula One is you don't get like this big overview of everything that your business is doing, right? You're far too focused on what you've got going on. So it's been a lot of learning for me, understanding all the different things. Essentially we have 4 businesses on campus in Milton Keynes with now powertrains, advanced technologies, all of that. So getting to sort of get a bit more of an overview of all of that and all the things we do has been amazing. And then there's sort of 2 sides to my role. One side is all of the stuff we do with our partners, so content. I was in Detroit just last week for the launch of the car, and all of that stuff. And then there's sort of I guess the passion project stuff that I get to do with Red Bull. So some of our partners are obviously in the D&I space. We Driven by Us, as I know Carol is familiar with, are going to be one of our partners at Oracle Red Bull Racing this year, which was something that was nice for me to sort of get to make this introduction and help that partnership come together. And then obviously we have our Talent Academy and STEMX. Now, our Talent Academy with our graduates that we take every year, we're on our second cohort of graduates this year. We have a Talent Academy that's also got a load of apprentices in. So I get to do a lot of that mentoring as part of that and help these graduates and apprentices on the journey that they want to be on and sort of help them find the pathway that they want to find, which I love doing. So the job's sort of multifaceted. I get a lot of change and variety. It can at times be a little nerve-wracking. I think there are times where I'm acutely aware that now in this role as an ambassador, there are the best part of 2,000 people on campus in Milton Keynes, and it's my job to represent them well. So that can be a little nerve-wracking. That's a responsibility that I take on, but I absolutely love it. It's been great for me.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, we've got a couple of questions come up in the chat.
Let's do it.
Somebody
Me
saying,
too. Do you want me
having
to
been,
read some of them out, or?
I'll read the first one, then you'll do the
Okay.
next one if you want. Having been in the pits, do you think you could comment on some of the wheel gun issues that could use updates or research? This is from a student called Sanya, because she said she's looking at these topics.
Okay, so I say to you that other than like genuine equipment failure, with the examples being, I think last year, early on in the season, Red Bull had a couple that were equipment failure and they were literally like broken wiring looms. Outside of that kind of thing, the vast majority of pit stop issues are human error. None of the pit crews will particularly want to admit it, but ultimately, we've got to quite a place now with these sort of sensor laden guns. They're very well tuned and serviced. It's very rare that something like that's not just an actual physical breakage actually goes wrong with the wheel gun. The problem that teams have now with wheel guns in terms of researching and developing them is that it's now an in-cap cost. So as part of these financial regulations, wheel guns and equipment come under that cost. So you have this situation where we spent a lot of time and money getting this done before 2021. So certainly with our wheel guns, getting them to where we wanted them and where we knew we could leave them for a long time, before 2021. And I remember before that season, Jonathan Wheatley saying to us, if there's anything on the wheel guns that you need, You have to get them through design this year because it's just not going to happen afterwards. So that's one of the biggest sort of barriers now, that teams really don't want to spend the money on wheel guns, because even if you can go and find sort of, a couple of tenths here, a couple of tenths there over the course of a season, it's far more likely that human error is going to be your issue than the guns themselves.
Okay. Want to read the next one, Ivelka?
Yeah, we have loads coming in on the Q&A and the chat. So I'm going to try my best, Calum, to group some of them.
Okay.
So some of them we've already gone through. We have, when you look back at your path from college into F1, which one or two decisions do you think actually moved the needle and got you noticed by the teams? So would you say it was definitely the practical side, or the combination of that and you being visible in the space?
I mean, look, I think certainly early on in my career, it was what I was willing to do, practically, logistically. I set myself a goal when I went to college that it didn't matter who. Look, like I said, I'm a competitive person. So I was in a college class of 60, and I walked in there on day one and I said, it doesn't matter what any of these other 59 people are willing to do to succeed. I'm willing to do more. Right. So that was the first thing, was just mindset. And I genuinely, it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered how hard you competed against me. I would have found a way to win. Right. That's what I do. Right. In terms of key decisions, I think, the two that kind of stand out for me. The first one is that I made a decision to bunk off college one day, walk into the circuit during the setup for the Brit Car 24-hour, and walk into every single garage and offer my services for free for the weekend. That was a key decision for me. It was ultimately how I ended up doing my first ever race. It stood me out among my tutors in the college as someone that's willing to sort of do something, go out on a limb, do whatever it takes to find an opportunity. So that was probably one of the first key decisions that I made, which at the time felt insignificant, but looking back on it, really was. And then I guess the second one was way later on, when I decided that I was going to sort of build this social media following, be willing to sort of put myself out there a little bit, and ultimately, break the rules. I guess that's the common thread between these two things that I did. In both of them, I broke rules to get what I wanted, because at the time, I'll tell you, the social media policy when I was at Rebel Racing did not permit me to go and do podcasts and interviews and fan Q&As on social media. And I put myself in a position where I said to the team, well, look, I really want to do this. People are finding it really valuable. If you honestly feel like you're in a position to say that this is detrimental to the brand, go ahead. But I didn't give them that opportunity, right? So I broke the rules, but in a way that was beneficial to both them and me. And it kind of put the team in a position where it was like, well, this is working, right? So I guess the common thing with that is that, I was always willing to think outside the box. And when it came down to it, I feel like I'd always rather regret doing something and having to apologize than missing out on an opportunity. Put yourself in the room every single time.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that. I'll just see one I would really quite like to ask, because I think this is quite poignant, especially where you are now. There's Benjamin Tompkins has put something in the Q&A to say that he's looking to wanting to get into becoming into F1 either as an engineer or a mechanic, but he's still going to become a young dad. And he says, is it doable to work in this role with a family, and how do you make it work? As you understand, you're away for a lot of the year, so this will be very relatable to you, I think.
Yeah, look, what I will say is it's absolutely doable, right? I mean, people often ask me how I managed it. It is a long time away. 2024, I was out of the country for 197 days. So when people ask me how I was able to do that with a 6-year-old at the time, I say I had a very understanding partner, right? So that's one thing. I think one of the things that I say to people, I often say that motorsport is a young person's game, not because you can't do it once you have all of these things like a family and all that. It just makes it a little bit easier. But if you want to go and be a race engineer, perhaps you just have to look at it as what you want to do. Perhaps you don't want to go and do a full 24 race season of Formula One and be away from your child. but perhaps you could manage, you know, the 10, what is it, 10, 12 races of a WEC season.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, so these are the things that you can weigh up. And like I said, we all look at Formula One, you forget there's so much other racing out there. And there are also plenty of engineers roles that would allow you to be largely factory based and perhaps go out and do some in-season testing or pre-season testing. So you can find the best of both worlds. It is possible. Don't think that it's not achievable. You will have to be willing to at time, you know, make some sacrifices. I made clear in my dedication to my book that one of the sacrifices I feel that I made was time with my daughter when she was young. Ultimately, if you've got goals, mate, you're gonna have to make some sacrifices to achieve them.
Oh, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
another
So
one, Velka.
so we have one, someone said, I think this is Kimmy. I'm 17 years old at college studying second year, light vehicle maintenance. Looking for work experience has been hard due to company licenses. He's had background with Ferrari, Mercedes, but is also looking to apprenticeships. He lives near Brands Hatch and enrolled to do scrutineering. I guess his question is more around like, how do you move or be bold enough to go out there and get that work experience? You talked really clearly
Yeah.
in your own journey that you was just going out and you just grabbed the opportunities where you saw it.
Yeah.
But some people might be quite shy, or you know, what practical advice would you give someone to secure those right work experiences?
Look, I think one of the only things that makes this easier is actually experiencing that first no. Right? I think experiencing that first no and coming to the realization that that's all it is, it's just a no, and you just move forward, is actually really helpful. I look, my experience when I first went to Silverstone to look for work, honestly, I must have gone through nearly 30 garages of people telling me they just weren't interested. Um, it doesn't necessarily get easier each time, but one thing you do learn is that you walk out of there when someone said no, and actually there's not a great deal else that's affected your life. You're just going to move on to the next opportunity. And I think, look, resilience is a key skill. It's not something everybody has. It's not something that you just gain. It's something that you work towards, right? And being resilient and sort of learning that those no's and those knockbacks only ever can make you stronger if you're willing to get back up, is a valuable lesson to learn, right? So don't be afraid of the no's. The same way I say don't be afraid of failing. Ultimately, you're going to look back in 10 years time and you're either going to be a successful race mechanic doing what you want to do, or you're going to be the person that got knocked back a couple of times and said, oh, I've had enough of that, and I gave up. Look 10 years ahead and say, you know, what kind of person do I want to look back on? I guess that's probably the biggest thing, right? I can't tell you how to find that sort of, I guess, bravery to walk in with your chest out and your chin up. But I can tell you that even when it doesn't go the way you want, it's not that bad.
Exactly. No, exactly. And like I said earlier to anybody, if you literally go to a race meeting with your CV and wander around the paddock, and whether it's a small clubby or a touring car meeting or a brick car meeting, just go up to somebody and say,
Yeah.
I want to become XYZ. Can I come and hang out with you? Can I come and watch what you're doing?
Yeah.
They're not often going to say no. They're going to say, okay, you can come and wash some tires. You can come and wash the car. Be prepared to do anything. Show that
Absolutely.
willingness, and then once you get that in, then you've got your in. But you've got to put yourself out. You can't have your mum or your dad going there and talking on your behalf. You've got to show that you're willing to do that. And again, there's also other subsidiaries that are working at circuits. So you've often got the tire companies. You've often got Michelin or Pirelli there. Go out to work at the tire. You can learn so much from. In fact, you learn an awful lot about how the cars are set up from the tires. So there's the tire people. Yeah. There's often the fuel people. You know, as I said, also become a marshal. That's one of the easiest ways to do it, and that gives you confidence. So you just have to put yourself out there, you know, and
I was going to say, Carol, you know, it's worth noting. You might look at a Formula One team and say, oh, well, they've got all these resources. They're not going to want me. But like I said, again, there's way more to motorsport, and it is it seems really odd to me that there are many small teams out there that would turn down help and labor, with the deal being that they get to school somebody and teach them. You've just got to make that first move, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So, and obviously, don't forget, I did mention as well karting teams. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
karting teams, companies around the country as well. So start off
Mm.
somewhere, because all experience is relatable and transferable. It gives you transferable skills, you
Yeah.
know.
And just being bold, I think, you know, just feeling the fear and doing it anyway. That's like my theme and my motto. Just feel the fear and do it anyway. You will seek the reward. I know we got a lot of questions coming in. So Callum, just conscious of time, and Carol, just so we can wrap up soon. I'm going to do some quick fire questions based on what some people have
Okay.
asked.
There's
So
one that's coming up about CVs. We can try and cover about CVs, I think.
Yeah, so we're gonna do those. So the first one will be, what is the one or two things you would recommend someone should highlight on their CV when looking for jobs in motorsport?
Well, ultimately, it's that experience. So if you're at uni and you have access to a Formula student team, absolutely, like, brilliant. That real world experience is something that hiring managers are going to be looking for. And then the other thing that I think is really important to be able to demonstrate, and it's harder through a CV, but certainly if you get to the interview stage, is we're in a point in F1 where what we used to call soft skills are not soft anymore at all, right? Those are hard skills. Your ability to communicate, your ability to walk in the room and make people smile and be personable and get through the tough days and keep your chin up. These are hard skills. These are important skills. These are things we need. One of the things that I'll say is that at Red Bull, as a general business policy, we would rather hire somebody that is underqualified, but their personality will bring the team upwards, than necessarily somebody who's studied it all but walks into a room and is, very quiet and keeps their head down. Like, ultimately, what you've got to remember is that when you're applying to work in motorsport, for the most part, you're not just applying to work at a business, you're applying to become part of a team, right? So all of those other skills that are outside of your technical skills, they are become so much more important, right? Now, I tell you, in the garage, one of the things that I think that we've always been really strong on is that we have a personality for every occasion, right? We've got the person that keeps everyone sensible when things are getting out of hand. We've got the person that can make everyone laugh when you've had a 14-hour day. We've got the person that can bring everyone together, get us motivated. These are all personality traits that if you look around your friend group right now, you probably have each of those personalities in your friend groups, because naturally as humans, we tend to surround ourselves with different skills that we need. And that's the same thing that a team is doing. So if you can highlight who you are as a person and what makes you you and what makes you different, that will go a lot further than you realize.
Brilliant. No, thank you. Even though that wasn't quick fire.
Sorry.
But just one final question and then we're going to wrap up. And I think this is linked quite nicely with what you were saying. Someone asks about, with greater numbers nowadays in terms of people, is there a danger of being too specialized or over specialized, and not being able to understand the bigger picture of the car and its development? So do we aim for more people, or do we aim for a small group of people that are just know their thing?
Look, I'd say, especially, if you're in this process of studying right now, I wouldn't necessarily say you have to worry about going down a route where you feel over specialized. One thing I will say, and I worked last year with one of our partners, Hexagon, on what they call the Future Skills Challenge. So we're trying to recognize in this industry the skills that we are going to need in 5-10 years time. So what I would say is, if you're in that thing of where you really want to specialize, just try and look to see that the skills that you're specializing in are ones that are going to be future needs for these teams, right? Even if they're not necessarily right now. Like, I think as an example, we're sort of still very early on in using AI in some of our engineering decisions and things like that. But engineers and people who are working towards those future skills, that still puts you in a good place. I don't think you have to worry about being over specialized. And also, once you have the basics of engineering, motorsport careers, they're not rigid, right? You can take a pathway and find that it's malleable, and in the right business as well. You know, we have a real thing for just creating job roles, because we'll hire someone for one job role, discover that actually their skill set can be utilized so much better elsewhere. So we'll just change their job role. And F1 teams are becoming far more flexible. You know, it's not the rigid sort of process and procedure that it used to be in the structure of teams. You can be quite flexible.
Yeah, brilliant. Perfect. Well, thank you for that. I know we have a lot more questions, and apologies that we couldn't get through all of them. But I'm sure people need to have their dinner, and I'm sure Callum needs to have his dinner and get ready for the week and the rest of the week. But just some final remarks, and thank you so much, Carol, for hosting and, you know, kicking off this conversation, and, you know, getting Callum to join us this evening. I'm sure everyone found it really, really valuable. But some of the key things that I want you all to leave with, based on what Callum has said, and you've gotten a lot of thanks, Callum, and
No,
congratulations
thank you all.
from
Honestly, it's always a
everyone.
pleasure. Thank you
So
so much.
it's very, very well deserved. But some of the key stuff is persistence and networking. This is so crucial. I can even comment from my own journey. If I wasn't bugging an engineer about supporting and volunteering at an event while I was in my investment banking job, I wouldn't be working for the governing body. I pestered that engineer for over a year. Be like, please, if you have anything, or, you know, if you have any volunteering, please let me come. And I was just like, anything that I can get. And I was emailing him every couple of months. So that I can say that for myself as well, Callum. That is such a testament, especially in this industry. Set key goals. I get a lot of young people from schools saying, I want to work in F1, but then when you ask them, what do you want to do? Or anything. You have to be really, really clear as to your goal and how you want to, you know, support or add value to teams. Teams are looking for value add, not someone who is a culture fit. They want to know what you can bring to the table. They want to know what advancements and knowledge and innovation that you can bring. What do you have that you can contribute to that? And then lastly, trackside experience. I know someone said something about they don't have any tracks near them. Do you have any karting circuits, indoor, outdoor? Do you have any mechanics around your area? You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be in Motorsport Valley, but you can find these experiences in local garages. And I know some local garages actually are part of clubs, motorsport clubs. So, you know, find the ones that perhaps are, you know, aligned to a motorsport club. On the Motorsport UK website, which is now revamped, you would be able to actually find clubs in your local area. So reach out to them. There are so many, even in urban areas, that you can get involved in. And it doesn't matter what that trackside experience is, from hill climb to working in a karting track, whatever it is, get that work experience and trackside experience where you can, even no matter how small it may seem. So those are just some final key reminders and things just for you to continue your journey, continue pursuing. You will get there. I have every confidence in all of you really pushing the barriers to get your foot in the door, and just work really hard and be persistent. So once again, thank you, Carol and Callum, for your time tonight. It's been so appreciated. And thank you everyone for spending the evening with us as well. Please ensure that you continue to keep up to date on the Discord. If you're not on the Discord, an email will be sent, but just stay in touch and keep updated. And until then, I wish you all a lovely evening. Carol and Callum, if you stay on for a little while, that will be great.
No problem.
But thank you, everyone.
No, thank you, Calum. Thank you, everybody. And just as a little side note, if anybody wants to go to a race meeting, if they get in touch with Velka, I might be able to arrange some tickets for during the year. And I know also we're working on trying to do a taster day. So look out for on the Discord for when we're going to do a taster day, where I'll take people around one of the circuits and show you the different roles you can do. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone.
Amazing.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you.
Oh.
People are going. Got a couple more there. Oh, thank you so much. That was
Oh, it was a real pleasure.
That's
Honestly, I
good.
love.
And once the questions that come, I can see they were coming in.
No, it was great. It was great to speak to you all as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So we've still got a few people on there. Are you able to kick them off? Are we able to collate any of those questions at all, Velka? Are you able to get them off?
I'm on mute.
Sorry.
We should be able to
and then
some...
maybe if we send them to you, Calum, we could maybe get you to do, and we could maybe put them on the Discord, and then
yeah, for sure. If you send them to me, I'd love to answer them all so that you can have them there sort of permanently.
Yeah.
There is one about DRS which was quite
there was
interesting.
Okay. Yeah, there's a couple of technical ones, but it was just getting too
That's
much.
cool.
Yeah,
for sure.
But no, just thank you so much once again.
We've still got two people on.
I wonder.
Should we kick them out or not?
I don't know if I end it, if it's going to do. But either ways, just thank you so much again, Calum. It was great to have you with us. Thank you, Carol. And we'll keep you updated with what's happening and, kind of any good news stories that came out of tonight's session as well. And are you happy for us to post on our Instagram? Is that?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Brilliant. No, thank you so much. But I'll let you all go.
Wonderful.
And I'll catch you all soon. Take care.
And let's keep up. We must be up, Calum, for a coffee.
Absolutely, yeah. Carol, send me a message. We'll find a time.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to be at some races this year as well. So at some point, I'll probably bump into you.
That'd be good because it'd be nice to sort of like see if I can get a bit more involved in with what I'm doing as well, and tell you a bit more about the stuff that I'm doing as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. But lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Take
Have
care.
a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.